Welcome back to this week's episode of Green Enterprise, where every week I have a conversation with a prominent Black cannabis executive or advocate that I feel like is making inroads and positive progress, not only for themselves, but for more of us hoping to come into the space. Today with me, I have a legendary activist, artist, and entrepreneur, M1 from Prez, whose presence in the space, not only in cannabis, as Black culture over the past few decades, cannot be overstated. So it's a true honor to have you here, my brother.
Oh wow, man! I really I'm honored to be here, and I'm humbled by your introduction, and glad to step in the shoes that my ancestors have left and for me to fill. So let's chop it up.
Yeah, precisely. So my first question would be to you as someone who has so much success, both critically, personally, financially. Like, what do you feel like you have left to prove as you take on new ventures and you expand your brand into new areas of commerce?
I mean, you know, the to be quite frank, the objective is liberation. You know, we have made some concessions for our people and in the name of our people, and as long as I could have seen it to be valuable, I want my voice to be one that represents the highest aspirations and goals of our community. um, so a lot of that stuff can happen subjectively during the course of life. We achieve certain goals and we knock down certain things on the list, but I think there's a collective or collectivized action that really demands like the world to speak to it at every turn. No matter where we are, whether we're talking about LBGTQ rights, or talking about police brutality, whether we're talking about the climate question. All roads kind of seem to begin and end with how the human experience can change and evolve in order so that we can all live fairly and equally and shape the world so that this thing works better. So in my case, when you're talking about culture, which I'm a cultural representative, um, but more so a voice for our movement and the Black liberation movement, to be specific. When you talk about this, the space of cannabis, I think there's a lot to be said, especially from a voice that has been attacked for so many years around this. So, it's not so much about my personal goals, even though I do understand the plant and plant medicine, and do have my own personal history with, this whole journey, that I do think needs to be shared with the world. But more so, there is in general an outcry for, real wellness talks to solve all of our illnesses and ills and maladies that have been put down around on us around cannabis, around capitalism. And cannabis is one of those tinctures, one of them cures, one of those things that we need. And I think so that's where it is for me. It's not personal. Although I plan to walk this road with a lot of us, me and
Right.
you together. Yeah.
Exactly. And one thing that I have to give you your credit for, and this is not to devalue anybody else's contribution to legal cannabis, but most rappers come in and just license their likeness out, right? Or they do a partnership with a cannabis company for a set amount of money, right? But one thing that I admire about you and your initiatives is that you're building it from the ground up. You have
Yeah.
a real ecosystem of companies. You are a true founder, co-founder, and you're a true architect of where you see the space going. And I think that is an example that many other people of prominence should follow coming into this space. Most of us are coming in looking for like just a brand deal or a cool look, whereas M1 is figuring out like, how do I really structure out a cannabis company that is living, breathing, sustainable? So for one, I want to give you your credit for that, and two, I want to ask you, what exactly was the thinking about you coming in a very strategic way into the space?
What it is that well, first of all, I want to say thank you for acknowledging that. And that is very important, not to take away from anybody who is licensing their brand. But there's so much that we can do with this kind of real estate that we're in. So, People Army Farms, which is directly related to People Army, if you know Dead Prez or RBG, People Army Farms became this brand that I was cultivating around like, partnering with grassroots organizations or, key figures or icons or political prisoners to be able to, at the point of sale where people are buying cannabis, in legal or even gray areas, you're part of that sale. Part of that gift will go towards the campaign to, ease, water rights for the indigenous community, or on the books for political prisoners. We have, worked with people like, Mission Green, my brother Weldon, and the Last Prisoner Project with Corvain Cooper and Dante West and the rest of these guys. All these things have been a plan about how to formulate, how can we make everything that we put our energy into around cannabis able to be a give back. And so my partner, Zach, in Urban Aroma, sees life the same way that I see it. He sees, this world as a place that needs to have a lot of wrongs righted, a lot of ills overturned. And so with Urban Aroma is like, okay, come here for the cannabis, stay here for the culture, and in that conversation, we're going to be able to talk about, the reason why we would partner with the Fortune Society in order to, make, land, mark legislation around cannabis, or why in DC where we have, some gifting stores, how we can have lobbyists who can, take the idea that in the gray market we're pulling down the fact that gifting, is something that's useful for a community that again had been laid on by the criminal justice system, and we have been deemed criminals for something now that's being celebrated and used to support and propel the economic bottom line for cities around the US and even around the globe. So I think there's a higher way to access and use cannabis as a tool to push our agendas, and I think that really that's the only way to do it. And even when we partner with people like Jim Jones with Saucy Brand, we're doing a song with Corvain Cooper and Jim Jones, where now Jimmy is talking about cannabis legislation and equality and equity, social equity, where before a lot of artists may not have been talking about that. Urban Aroma is putting together a Gift Lifted mixtape with J Period, where we all the artists are being able to segment or segue towards like, cannabis legalization as not just around like, recreational, have fun, good time, chatter. This is hardcore political conversation that is pushing the envelope, in all the areas that matter. Weldon has put out an initiative towards, Joe Biden's Democratic Party, around bringing, cannabis prisoners home, and putting money on their books. We have, as Urban Aroma, launched a match campaign whereby we, will match dollar for dollar with people who want to see themselves as part of something that is really going to do something for people who really need it the most. A lot of us long and forgotten behind enemy lines, like again, for something that now, we look up and it's saving the bottom line for a lot of the industry in America today. For me, it's never going to be just about cannabis alone. It's always about how we do what we do and are able to reach our objectives. I don't care where we sit in a political perspective. I mean, you can be, you could be a janitor, you could be a principal of a school, you can be a revolutionary. The same way you can be a ganja farmer and be a revolutionary. And so, yeah.
One thing that I appreciate about your what you're structuring out is you're deceptively small in your business practices. And what I mean by that is a lot of people look at your brand and what you've done as a musician, and they just want to engage with you because they respect you and your platform so much, but they don't even know about supporting, Urban Aroma or Gifted BK or all these things that you're doing, that they are indirectly supporting a larger cause in cannabis. And I think you are a case study on the graduation of the rap activist, right? I think in the 90s and 2000s, it was enough to talk about it. That was dangerous enough to put that into your content, put that into your lyrics, put that into your videos. But gentlemen like yourself are now 20 years later saying, okay, now that rap is its own ecosystem of business, you are positioning it to benefit far more people than just yourself. So I think that should be commended as one. And for two, I have a question about just how you exist in the New York market, because I think I know most of us look at California as where to go to structure out a successful company, but you guys have firmly planted your flag on the East Coast. What was the thinking behind that, and kind of what has been some of the differences that you're seeing operating on the other side of the country?
Well, yeah. Well, first of all, I want to say thank you for asking that. And one also, when we talk about like legalizing marijuana and like culturally, I'm always taken back to Peter Tosh. He did it, Step and Razor, Red X. He did it kind of the best, just kind of like, just within of his songs, he's like, doctors use it, lawyers use it, politicians use it, legalize it, and I will advertise it. And, these are, I think, he was like, even, before hip hop and reggae and Jamaican music is the impetus that gave birth to hip hop music. So it's only right that like out of the Jamaican culture and the ganja that was in Jamaica is born like this hip hop that, we celebrate from the Bronx to Brooklyn to Watts to Botswana, and every graffiti character is in their mouth is a spliff. And, it's part of our culture that we carried forward and pushed forward. And again, like, I think now is where we 2022 version of Legalize It by Peter Tosh. This is where, M1, where Urban Aroma stands. We can vertical it. We can make all the vibrations for for legalizing it in so many ways. Not only, like I said, all the byproducts that come from it, the medicinals that we are made aware of, the bottom line economically, the jobs, the whole green economy that's involved. I mean, I think there's a way now we can understand it from a much more globalized position when we talk about cannabis. So, it made me say, especially when kind of recreational legislation happened in New York City, where I'm from, in Brooklyn, I can imagine, so many times that we had gone to jail or been accosted by the police for marijuana, and now when I look back at it and see exactly what's happening now, there needs to be some righting of wrong, some retribution around it. There's a distinct paranoia that comes with like the association of New York City and smoking weed, but now here we are where, we are celebrating a gray market which can flourish, and where, for all intents and purposes, we have established our gallery dispensaries, Gifted BK and Legacy NYC, in Brooklyn and Lower East Side Manhattan, respectively, because we know there can be places where we can celebrate hip hop culture, and at the same time, we can talk about gifting cannabis and push that legislation. We can establish ourselves as minority leaders and owners who can then hold hands with other, businesses in our community who see us as viable. Our next door neighbors in both of our communities love us. They say, from the Indian food next door to the shoe and hat and suit maker next door in Manhattan. We have a bond. Now we find ourselves with a common bond. In New York City, fending ourselves and through the pandemic. And I think we see relief. There's relief in that. that. There's a new way to see forward around cannabis and how it can be helpful and useful. And so that's what we're doing. Urban Aroma being kind of like, the directory by which you can find our dispensaries in New York, and fighting through gray market legislation is going to help us see the way that we can really be viable and useful. And it's a scary space to be, because you never know, what the board or city council or the mayor or any politician may take a position around as it faces cannabis. But let me tell you, we are ready. And so, we are ready to face them with adjacent with other organizations, community organizations who see also that we can partner and be united in will and action around this and these actions. And we'll meet you on Capitol Hill. We'll meet you on the front steps of City Hall, and we'll battle it out there and see what makes the most sense. And I think at the end of the day, what makes the most sense is people power, and the people vote yes. The people say yes to cannabis. The people say yes to liberation of a lot of our ideas. And so that's kind of where we are with it. So our dispensaries and galleries are cultural destinations. We call them cultural destinations because in that moment where you walk into this gallery and then you see Seth's crew, iconic historic graffiti piece, or Martha Cooper on one wall, or Annie Panicoli on one wall, and a Ryan Keeley, modern artist, on this wall, you then also begin to have the conversation where culture meets cannabis and where people's minds and ideals are. And that's how you sway the world. And that's what we're doing.
That leads me directly into my next question that I love to ask my guests, and you specifically. I'm looking forward to your response. I always ask adversely, what happens if we don't involve ourselves? What happens if we allow this opportunity or this economy to be built out without us in a meaningful way, specifically in such an important market like New York City? Like, what would it look like if we do not take this opportunity to advance as Black people in cannabis?
Let me tell you, I think you asking that question, but you know very damn well what it looks like. It's like Tupac said, it's a white man's world, it actually has existed that way for so long that we are used to it. What we're doing is taking a claim in a space that we belong in and should be, and we are jutting our Black and brown and faces in conversations that we long should have been having voices and representation in from our perspective. And so, this fight right now is not only to level the playing field, but also to be seen as viable as an economic force, viable in our community where we are, right now. And so it's a critical time. I think it's a critical time to be able to be establishing our dispensaries or our consumption lounges or our medical marijuana establishments, because it's almost like the vote. From Dad Prez's point of view, I would always say, like, we talk about the vote, but probably the most important vote you can make is with your money, is with your dollar, because that shows exactly what people want, where people's interests are, and where people are willing to put their energy. And so I think people are saying yes to cannabis in that way, and especially to the Black ownership and Black perspective and empowerment.
Right. And you being a child of New York, Black enterprise being based in New York, and New York, in my estimation, being the most influential city on the planet, what advice would you give to, the Black viewer watching who's like, man, I really want to get involved in New York. It's really early on. I don't really know what's going on. Like, where should they go? What should they follow? Who should they follow? Like, what should they be paying attention to in New York City specifically?
Well, I can tell you, there are some amazing cannabis activists who are doing some work. We need to invest in our social equity programs. There's so many around. There's a sister named Mary Pryor who put out a handbook now around social equity for Black people. And we held inside our dispensaries and Gifted BK and one in Firehouse in Harlem, with my brother Jareem, we held these kind of like Black centered study sessions about, what is the new legislation? How are laws changing? We had lawyers on hand to explain, cannabis lawyers who represent, businesses as well as individuals on how to educate ourselves on what moves to make next and how can we deputize ourselves to become like part of this growing, voice for cannabis. I think, right now, if this is the time. This is critical. You need to go visit a dispensary. You need to make it a place where people see, this is not like in the grow and happening and the need for it is now. And so if you don't know, definitely go to Urban Aroma. Where you're going to find content and podcasts that I'll be doing, the Revolutionary Rise podcast, Revolutionary Rising, pardon me, and you'll see our conjunction with Mission Green again. Again, they've donated $30,000, towards these programs, and our match campaign. Get in and match with us. You know what I mean? Match dollar for dollar. If y'all want to know how to get in or where to be involved and how to make your money work. And again, this is a cannabis initiative that not only N1 from Dead Prez supports, but Little Yachty and Lil Baby and Drake and a lot of people who have prominent voices in the young community. This initiative has happened that way. So I think right now it's time to strike while the iron is hot. If you see us out there, if you see the support happening, find a way to chime in and be a part of it. And believe me, like this is Fortune 500 business we're talking right now. For anybody who's listening and wondering why me and you are making this chatter, or even why this is so important, because we're talking about legacy. You're talking about leaving a legacy and generational wealth, and literally planting seeds in the ground that will live and feed generations to come. So that's why.
So this is one important point I want you to make, because I actually got introduced to you through Kamel Jacob Bell, who's a dear friend of mine at this point, great businessman, one of the most impactful, important Black people in cannabis. But one thing I've learned about you just through our conversations and observing how you operate, you have made it a point to have meaningful partnerships with other Black people in the space. Can you talk about, how important it is to align together with other capable Black people in the space? Cannabis is not something where you can come in and figure it out yourself. You're not gonna come in here and be Mark Zuckerberg. Like, we all have to figure out how to combine resources, figure out where our objectives overlap and work together on it, right? So how important has it been for you to partner with other capable, qualified Black people to make progress in cannabis?
These alliances are everything. You know what I mean? Especially when we're at our highest and most developed, sophisticated business self. So companies that find themselves cannabis adjacent, or artists or business entrepreneurs who are throwing their hat into this field, we have to find ways to work toward each other, unite, and make ourselves stronger as a collective, as one. There's people like Al Harrington, whose Viola brand is, growing and becoming this mammoth thing. If just because of his association and who Al is as a former NBA star, and so many other people in the NBA who, as we know right now, the NBA is relaxing their kind of cannabis, constraints with the players. There is a viable zone to be involved, in that way. There's so many young Black cannabis entrepreneurs. I just worked with, John Monopoly, who was, partnered in the Deep Dish brand, and just visited New York with Pizza Pusher, who's a friend of ours. All of these are minority, cannabis, minority cannabis owners, but who are doing who probably are biggest in all the spaces. You know, John Monopoly, known for his work with Violator and 2 Chainz and Kanye West and G Herbo and the rest of it. You know, this is, you know, this is the highest of the kind of organizational excellence that we have in our community. So to be able to turn all of that stuff, those layers of execution, into cannabis, you know what I mean? Jay-Z's affiliation with and investment, and you know, all the cannabis verticals as they're related, everything from the ground to the dispensary, it matters, you know. And believe me, if these keen minds are able to see it, if you want to be in that space and talk that talk and walk that walk amongst like these Black excellent, moguls, this is now the time to do so. And together we are much stronger. We become kind of the force that must be reckoned with. And you know, to put it quite, you know, clearly and flatly, you know, cannabis before wasn't called cannabis, it was just weed. And let me tell you, the weed game was like, is like white as hell. Like if you ever been to California when it was chronic, with the chronic, the people who was making the chronic were not Black people. You know what I mean? You know, the green triangle was racist as, you know what I mean? Pardon me from cursing on here. But like you go out there and these is hillbilly white boys who don't want Black people to have no parts of what they were doing out there with us. You know, everybody from Eureka to Humboldt County to up going all the way up Nevada City and all of that in California. If you ever been out there, you know, you will, few and far between, you're gonna see a Black person. You know what I mean? And now the game is changing. So it's time for us to unite and make ourselves heard and known and seen and do all the incredible, crazy things that we do, that we innovate the world with in cannabis as we do the rest of the world. You know, let's make up the cannabis dance. Let's do the clothes. Let's do the, you know, let's wear the production where, you know, let's make all of the culture that is all involved. That's where we are. We're at the precipice of that. So right. calling all excellent Black minds, that's what we need.
Right. And it's going to take all of us to assimilate and figure out how to have our own ecosystem, because if at any point in the supply chain we are entirely dependent on white money or the white corporations in the space, we already lose. But that's right. In closing, my brother, I just want to tell you that I'm truly honored to have this conversation with you. I grew up seeing you on television, watching what you do, how intentional you are. You are one of the few artists that I can say have never wasted a word. You've never wasted a line. Everything you've ever said has been intentional. So that in itself is why you should be appreciated and commended for your work. But you said something earlier that I want you to end out on. You said, you know, the best way to support and to show up is with your dollars. Where can our viewers who are in New York or in the tri-state, where exactly can they engage with your Gifted BK, with your other operations you have in New York City? And where can they reach out to you personally if they have any questions about coming into the space?
Well, first of all, if you've never been to New York City before and you come to New York or even to DC and you want to know where to find your cannabis, go to urbanaroma.com. And in that, you're going to be led to places that I'm affiliated, and not just my own dispensaries, but places that and business owners that we want to do business with and we want to send people to. You're going to run into King of New York Cannabis. You're going to run into, you know, again, when you come to Brooklyn, you got to come to, you know, 135 Grand Street in Williamsburg, right across from the Supreme store. You're going to come to Gifted BK and you're going to check out our work there. If you're in Manhattan, you're going to go to the Lower East Side. You're going to go to 98 Orchard Street and you're going to go check out where we are in the, like the heart of a really, really progressive community on Orchard Street. And we are that dispensary there. And that's how we're going to begin to link up and with each other and do what we do. You know, we are also, you're going to find us connecting with other events. We will be event oriented. We were just at Rolling Loud with an installation at Rolling Loud, and so, you know, in case you can't get to the dispensary, anywhere you go, any event you may be at, especially with forward progressive thinking Black minds, likely you're going to see our Urban Aroma team in New York City.
And where can they follow you personally on social media?
My Instagram is at M1 Dead Prez RBG. That's M the number one, and it's Dead Prez, that my group RBG, Red, Black, and Green, but RBG. And my Twitter is at M1 Dead Prez with no RBG on the end, just M1 Dead Prez. And those are the main kind of things that I use. Yeah, and other than that, just come catch me up in Gifted, and I give you one of these spliffs.
Yes, sir. And talking to people like you during the day reminds me that I made the correct career choice, man. Just some,
Thank you,
it
man.
never ceases to amaze me, the genius that exists amongst each of us who are figuring it out, who are doing things for others, doing things for ourselves. So I wish you the best of luck, my brother. And I can't wait to see what you got lined up in 2022.
Thank you. And thank Black Enterprise for having this discussion, and always being at the forward of our culture and inviting people like me to have a place to have this discussion. So, Brother Andrew, you awesome. Thank you.
Thank you, sir.